Okay, this is Joe from Book Buzz, and we got Mason in the dark with us. What's up, Mason?
Hello, everyone. Mason here. Now, it's been
I
so
love
long
it.
since I did that. It's been so long.
Yes, I missed that intro.
Me too.
And at the end, you say, "Have a good one."
Thanks ever so much for spending time with me today, and have a good one.
Ah, there it is. I love it. Oh, that's great. You got to end this today with that.
No, I want to do your intro anyway. Can we do what you and Mary do, or is that
Yeah.
or
So
is that
you'll
gonna
say
step on Mary's toes?
she'll love it. She'll love it. Are you ready?
Yeah,
Okay. Hey, everybody. I'm Joe,
and I'm Mason.
and we're Book
Book
Buds.
buds.
Very good. That was a good audition. I think you could definitely fill in for Mary.
Yes. Well, I'm pretty sure I could get rid of her after listening to this story.
Right. I cannot wait to get into that. So, everybody, today we are discussing a book called Him by JD Kirk. And Mason and I both listened to it. And so we buddy read this, but we did not discuss anything, right, Mason? We saved it all for today. So I don't know what Mason thinks about the book, and he doesn't know what I think. And that's how we went about it. And we're dying to know what each other thought. I think you're muted for some reason. Mason, can't unmute your guest.
I'm ever so sorry about that. I don't know
there
why
you
that
go.
happened.
Okay, there you are.
No,
So
we absolutely saved it until now. And then I accidentally sent you the link to my notes that last night. Because I was just on autopilot trying to get it all set up, get it all convenient, right? Joe's got my notes, we're all set up, the link's established. And I'm like, 5 minutes later, I'm like, oh no, it was my idea not to talk about it. Now I've sent him my notes.
Right. And I got your notes and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, okay, he wants me to get like a little preview. So it said request access. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to request access. So I didn't get like in immediately. So I guess that was kind of good because then you're like, no, don't look.
I've never typed a message so fast. Oh, no, don't look.
That's so funny. Yeah, you definitely take good notes because I'm looking at them now and they're pretty extensive.
Pretty extensive. I looked at the word count on them, and by the way, I've edited like the first few chapters of it, like cut out some of the stuff because I attempted to like do a mad dash and tidy them up like within the last few hours. So when I started, there was like 10,133 words.
Oh my god!
which is like Dishonored in Death, which is like my short story. That was like 4,500 words. So,
oh my
so it's
god!
like 3 short stories worth of absolutely ridiculous.
And you said it was like 30 pages plus, right?
I think I don't plus I think it might be it's somewhere between like 30 to 80 pages. I'm not sure.
What? Wow. So when you ask me, you're like, how many pages are yours? And I'm like, 8 pages front and back. Yours is like 80.
It's such a visual though. Imagine us both turning it. Imagine if we went to school together. We both turn up with our like notes for the assignment. You're like, you're there thinking, oh, I've done a really good job here. 8 pages front and back. These are extensive. Hand it to the teacher, and then I come in with a shopping trolley full of notes. I need a forklift to give it to him.
Right. I'll have page count envy. I mean, God. That is hilarious.
I dump the tome on her desk and it just crashes through.
Right. Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. All right. So let's see who we got in here today. Hello. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for spending your either morning or afternoon or wherever you are with us.
Yes. We got Lil J Gaming saying hello.
J Gaming. Hello.
We got our friend Cobalt Dragon. Hello.
Cobalt Dragon. Well, that's a nice name. I love Cobalt. Just to say, I want to get that out there. although having thought of that, is that cobalt as in blue or is it cobalt as in the creature? I want to know that. So tell us.
Okay. So we got a few friends in here.
That's good.
Lil J Gaming says hello, Joe. How you doing?
Joey. I'm absolutely dying to get to just talking about it. I'm not gonna lie. It's been killing me this entire time not talking about it.
All right, so let's get into it. But you got your answer. Cobalt, as in the color.
Okay. That's disappointing. You're not as cool as I thought you were.
Let's not insult our guests. Okay,
I'll do as I like. It's not my channel.
Oh, wow. That's how we're gonna play it. So Cobalt, our friend Cobalt Dragon said night sky color, love of astronomy.
Yes, it is a good color.
Beautiful.
I've used it for magical flames before, cobalt blue flames.
Ooh,
dramatic.
I could see that. All right, are we ready?
Where do you want to start? In fact, can I start? Because I do have one sort of thing that I want to get off my chest, and it's actually nothing to do with the book. It's more to do with Audible.
Okay, go.
Okay, I felt a little bit like there was some false advertising going on with this book, because you listen to the sample, which I always listen to the sample to make sure that I like the narrator. And I knew I was going to like David Tennant because I'm a big Doctor Who fan. And the sample has like sound effects and a bit of ambience to it, a bit of music. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be one of those Audible originals where it's somewhere between a book and an audio drama. And then as soon as the sample finishes, it goes into just the regular narration. There's no more sound effects, no more music. And then David Tennant, who they sort of advertised as being part of it, is a big part of it. But I feel like they sold him as being more of a part of it than he was, if that makes sense.
So I take it the sample was just the prologue.
Yeah, the sample was just the prologue, yeah.
Okay, which I thought was pretty cool because, yeah, he's in the car and, like, he puts his blinker on and you hear the blinker.
Yeah, and you hear a couple of different sound effects throughout, as he's driving along. And there was bits of music in the background.
Yes, you were really in that car with him. That was cool. So, yes, you're right. I didn't think about that. There really wasn't much else throughout the book like that.
No, there was nothing. And I was so disappointed by it because I was like, I don't know. It would have been fine going into it thinking that it was like a normal audiobook, but I feel like to have it just over the sample and sort of trick you into thinking, this is what it's going to be like, and then as soon as the sample ends, it's like, no, it's just normal.
Yeah, because we were discussing that beforehand, and you said Audible originals are kind of cool because it does have like that kind of like produced like feeling, like more so than regular like books. Yeah.
I'd just come off reading an Audible original before this, which was like a contemporary romance one, and that was done. It was all dialogue, just people talking over the like phones, and that was like a fully produced sort of audio novel sort of thing. And I don't think I would have minded as much if I hadn't then gone and sold it to you as like, listen to this Audible original, it's so cool and different, and then it just ends up being just a regular book. I felt a bit like an idiot.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I didn't really realize until you just said it, because I'm just so used to reading those like straight books with nothing extra that I didn't even realize. So don't worry.
Oh, well, that's a relief.
Yeah.
It was always going to stand out more to me because I'm production minded.
Yeah. All right, so that was one little disappointment for you.
But other than that, I actually really enjoyed this.
Okay. Yeah.
I was totally into it. It took me a chapter or two to settle into it. I was being all snarky in my notes originally because I'm like, okay, this is just sort of seems regular. But once I settled into it and it got its hooks into me, I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
like this.
Yeah, so I liked it too, Mason. Um, Big reveal. Um, for me, it was kind of almost like a roller coaster of emotions. First of all, we'll get into that because I think this author did a great job at like really drawing us into the main character's loss. I really felt it,
Me too.
and I really enjoyed the whole book. And then I am disappointed in
The
like
ending.
the ending, the reveal, what was really happening.
Oh,
I,
okay. I thought you were saying because I agree with you that I had a bit of disappointment over the very ending, but you're saying you were disappointed by the actual big reveal.
yeah, like I imagine we might want to wait a little bit to get into spoilers or not,
Mm-hmm.
but um yeah, I guess we can hold off a little bit. But yeah, I would have liked it a lot more if it was like what it
What it
was really.
seems.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because yeah, it seems more like
cooler.
dangerous and yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I
Hmm.
think it's going to be difficult talking about it without spoilers. So I don't know whether you want to wait or we can. I mean, we can get into spoilers if you want. um, in terms of what I thought overall, I was really the thing I was most impressed with was I think the pacing. I loved the rise and fall of tension. Like it felt like it was a constant sort of build, then a little break, and then straight back into building it back up again. And each chapter just ended with like a little hook that was, I think there was only one, and I can't even remember it now, but there was only one chapter where I was like, oh, I wasn't too fussed for the like end of chapter hook there. But yeah, I thought overall that was like the biggest strength for me was just like that pacing and keeping you drawn in, building the tension, then dispersing it, building it again, and then ending with a hook that's designed to give you that just one more chapter sort of feeling.
Yes, yes, I agree. Yeah, I was all into it. I really definitely when I wasn't listening to it, I was like, oh, I want to get back to it. I want to see what's happening. I was really intrigued and wanted to see where the story was going. So there wasn't a moment where I was bored or anything like that. I was in it the whole time. And if I could have called out of work and listened to it the entire day, I would have. So
I
I
mean,
was all.
I feel like we should probably we should probably give a little bit of an insight of what the book is actually about because we're just talking about it at the minute. We haven't even summarized what it's about for people.
Yes, you want to give
So
a summary?
yeah, so uh, it starts with the loss of Sarah's husband, and it explores her grief. But then she gets offered an opportunity. And it's an interesting one because the opportunity is you can talk to your husband again, or at least a version of him. Because obviously, the rise of AI is something that's in the cultural zeitgeist. So there is a company run by Nick's best friend, David, that has saved a digital copy of him basically, and they can provide Sarah with an AI copy of Nick for her to talk to help her through her grief.
Points for Zeitgeist, by the way.
Oh, of course, I'm an intellectual man.
I know you are.
Don't be fooled, it's just the British accent.
That does help. I got to tell you. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. So that's a good premise to start with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought that I did think that it took a little bit long to get to the actual Sarah is now talking to Nick thing. It was, I think, I looked at the timestamp of how long was left when she got the first message from Nick, and I think there was like 4 hours and 14 minutes left. So that's
Mm,
like a good 5 hours into it, and I feel like
mm.
that's probably the unique selling point of the story, but it takes quite a while to get there. However, I do think that it's sort of justified, because all the stuff leading up to when she gets the first message it's laying the groundwork for how like desperate and lonely she is, and sort of it's laying the foundations for why she ends up doing what she does, and why she ends up talking to Nick too, as she calls it.
Wow, so it was 5 hours in? I did not even realize that. It seemed like maybe I was just really into the story.
I could be wrong. I might be thinking of when she got the first voice message. I think
Mm,
that might be what I'm getting mixed up with, because the text messaging came quite quickly, but obviously it then transpires that there is also voice capability, and
mm.
I think it was about 5 hours in when David Tennant as Nick 2 sort of came into it. So I think that's what I might be getting confused with, because I think I made a note of it being like 5 hours in before we get any more of like the second narrator that you sort of
Right,
sold me on the book with.
right. Gotcha. Okay. All right, so maybe we should backtrack now. So, okay, so it opens up with Nick. So, what did you think of Nick? In that prologue, like to me, like I was very intrigued. He had something to talk to Sarah about. He's like, I got to talk to her about this. It's been too long. She deserves to know. And so I'm just like, okay, well, what does he have to talk to her about? Right. And then it ends with him getting, the truck crashes into him. Um,
Yeah, that was really well written as well.
yeah.
I thought, Nick's his sort of thought process was like quite interesting, like you said, intriguing in terms of like, okay, what does he want to confess? What secret is he keeping? And then I thought that it was a quite a stylish way of ending the chapter, with the light and the pain, and it like there was a
Yes.
little bit of like the sound dropped away. So when he said like
Hmm.
the pain, it had a real like punch to it.
Yes. That was so good. And it was very short. And then the
Well,
next chapter,
that's a consistent thing throughout. The chapters are
yes,
really short.
which I like.
Me too.
I don't like a long 50-page chapter.
I'm terrible for long chapters.
Or 80-page notes.
Yeah, exactly. That,
Oh my God.
take that as an indication of how long chapters would be in my writing.
But you just said you like short chapters when you're reading.
Yeah, I do.
That's funny.
I'm also an effing hypocrite.
I love it. That's all right. You do what you want to do.
Yeah, so then we switch to Sarah waking up alone and just having that feeling of knowing that something's wrong. And can we just talk about the first sort of massive red flag? Okay, so she mentions that she's like, I can find out where he is. And I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah.
she's going to use like Find My Phone or like some legitimate like thing. And then
Right.
it's like, no, she's got the trackers, and they're
Right.
under the carpet in his car and sewn into the lining of his bag. I'm like, lady, if that's the lengths that you feel that you need to go to because your trust is that low, it's
Yeah.
probably time to just call things quits anyway, because that's that's extreme.
She does not trust him at all. No.
No, no,
No.
no.
Right. So
I
that's the
like that
first
though,
thing that
because
like gives us some, doubt about him. And then she reveals that he cheated on her.
yeah, I really liked that line as well. Like, it was like a little line, big implications, where she's like, he's never home late. Well, once, but never again.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's a good little tidbit. Like I say, little line, big implications.
Right. Right. That was, oh my God. So I see we have some new people joining. So Andrew's Wizardly Reads is saying, what's up? Hey
Hello,
Andrew.
Andrew. Welcome in. Thank you very much for joining us. Lovely to have you.
He's never heard of this book, so we're discussing him. which is like an AI type of story, which we're just getting into right now. We liked it, so Andrew, you might want to give it a try. Um, so okay, so Sarah, so what I mentioned before, I was just really in her loss and her grief. The way that the author set this up, like, okay, yes, she's tracking him. She doesn't trust him. So that's like, we shouldn't be tracking people, right? So it's kind of questionable
Yeah,
on her part, but I
yeah, it's a
still,
big red flag.
yeah, but I still loved her. I still felt really bad for her. And she's there in the middle of the night. It's like 2 or 3 a.m., right? And she's wondering where her husband is. He hasn't come home, and he's done this before, and she's scared that he's doing it again, right? And then she has the tracker, so she's running up the street in the middle of the night to find him, because it turns out it's like really close to home. He's like right there, like not far.
Yeah, he was so close to home. Just, which was, if anything, was like the more like devastating thing. Like he didn't die far away. He was like on his way home to her, and it was like a matter of like streets away.
Yes. So she's thinking that she's gonna go and like look in the window and find him, having fun with some other girl, and instead she finds the car wreck. So, it
I,
was just heartbreaking.
I know. You know what I really liked, the notification from the trackers going off just as she spotted the car. So it was like at the
Yes.
same time, it's like you have reached your destination, and it was like
Yes.
so such a cinematic sort of moment. I could totally visualize it in my head.
Yes, that was good. You're right. Oh, so dramatic. So
I really
dramatic.
liked that during the funeral that came afterwards. I really liked that the crash itself became like the literal crash became like the figurative, metaphorical wreckage of her life. And that, oh
Mm,
man, that bit where she is when she's preparing to start her like funeral speech, and she's
yes.
like talking and she's trying to like get it started. It's just like, oh man, because it's funny because it was probably around there that I actually sort of started to care, because the thing is, I'm a big like meta nerd with these sort of things. I know how things work in these sort of books, so
Yeah.
I'm primed not to trust the protagonist.
Mm,
You have to go in assuming there's probably some level of unreliability, but I think the moment in the funeral was probably the bit where that sort of snarky side of me like turned off, and I actually
mhm.
sort of bought into it and started connecting emotionally with the story.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. I like that.
I really liked that. I love that even in the like midst of her grief, when she talks to Nick's parents, she realizes that she's like neglected them due to her grief, and she
Hmm.
thinks about the connective tissue that like bound them together as a family is now like
Mm,
broken, and it's replaced by Nick's absence. Like they're connected by their shared grief rather than connected by Nick directly now, and I thought that was really interesting.
yeah. Yeah. And yeah, her interaction with the parents when she goes over that first time. Oof. Like the way that this author just described everybody in their grief. And I guess it's tapping into our own grief. Of course, we've all had loss, we've all been to wakes and funerals. So when she's in that funeral, I'm just like, I the first few chapters, honestly, I actually felt it was just like not depressed, but like it was like a downer. Like,
Yeah, me
ay,
too.
ay, ay.
Totally agree. You know,
Yeah, I
I'd
really
never
felt
thought
the
about.
heaviness.
You know what I'd never thought about. It's probably not an original thought, but for me, I'd never really considered the parallels between a wedding and a funeral before. Like
Mm,
in terms of Sarah's situation where she's lost like a long term partner, it becomes the like symbolic like untying of the knot,
mm-hmm.
where
Yeah.
the wedding is the tying of it, and I'd never really thought about that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I also found it interesting how she was sort of getting. Um, it was upsetting her that people were having a good time,
Yes, yes.
which I thought was really interesting because obviously it makes sense from a character point why it would bother her because she's grieving. But I mean, I've been to wakes where they were good times, contextually speaking, as far as they can be, and I think I just found that an interesting dichotomy between like how she felt and how the rest of them felt, especially considering that Nick's like this big rock star um, persona sort of thing, a guy in a band. So I feel like it would have made sense that he probably would have wanted his wake to be more of a party than a thing.
Yes, that's true. And and you're so right. I mean, I've been to wakes where it's not necessarily a sad situation, and like you're sitting and you're talking with a group, and like you're getting a little bit too loud and laughy, and then you're just like, oh, we need to tone it down a little bit. Like we can't be all like happy, you know. So I just think that her including that in this bit just made it so realistic and tapped into like our own experiences, right?
I felt like they did, like JD Kirk did that a lot, and
Yeah.
I thought that one of the things that was really strong about their writing was it's not overly flowery or complex, but I think it's like effective in its simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's so concise and easy to understand, and there's never a metaphor where you're thinking, oh, that's awkward and clunky, like, or
Yes.
they've not tried to go over the top with that explanation. It's just always like simple and easy to understand and digest, and I think that makes the whole thing more immersive and really helps with the pacing too.
Oh, I agree. I agree. It's a very easy read, but very effective, like you said, and just real, just real. So when she was at the funeral and she was about to give like the eulogy or whatever, and then David swoops in and saves her, right?
Yeah, such a good moment.
Yeah. So like that was like I think that's the first time we were introduced to him,
Hmm.
and like we're made to think that he's a good guy and helping her out, and he's the friend and gonna comfort her and save her, right?
Yeah, because that first interaction, I thought when he sits down with her to when Melissa's gone out for a cigarette break, and David sits down with her at the table, I thought their interaction there was really good. Like two people who are connected through knowing Nick but haven't necessarily interacted, and it's really awkward, and it feels like they're trying to both put on a brave face for each other. And I thought that during the context of the actual conversation, I thought that it was quite a good moment of the best friend and the wife connecting.
Yes, absolutely.
I definitely made a note of it when the flask got mentioned, though. I don't know whether that was mentioned at the funeral or later in the office, but the flask, as soon as that come up, I was like, Chekhov's flask!
Wait, remind me, who had the flask?
David's flask.
What was the significance with that?
Well, we'll get into spoilers with that.
Why am I not remember? Okay, we got to get to the discussion because now I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank. Um, okay, so David, yeah, all right. So Nick and David were working on this AI project together, right?
Yeah, a startup that he mentions at the funeral. Um, and I thought that was a good little seed, an initial seed of that main plot. Like he doesn't go into detail with it; he just mentions the startup, and it also introduces like his business partner as well, just in the background, which I thought was a nicely done.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then she's like, well, he didn't tell me anything about this. So then we're brought back to that prologue. Like, is this what he has to talk to her about? Like, what's the problem? Right. I was like, okay, is that what does he have to talk to her about? Is he cheating again? Is he leaving her for this another person? Is it the AI thing? What could it possibly be?
Yeah, I know because it seems unreasonable at the time though when you're reading it because you're like, well, why would he not have just told her if he was working on some
Yeah.
on a fairly what seems to be a fairly big project. So that instantly gets. I think that makes it so you instantly dismiss that as the thing that he was going to tell her about.
Yeah. Right. So the intrigue deepens. Oh, okay, so moving right along. So he offers her the chance. David offers her the chance to reconnect with her dead husband.
He's been saved. He is now digitally immortal, and she can talk to a copy of him. Okay, so just without the context of the story, the actual concept itself of like the grief tech and stuff,
Mm.
good idea, yes or no? Because I kind of bought into it. Like I don't think it would be like a very good idea, but I can see how if it was implemented in a structured way, I could see how it could, help some people. It definitely wouldn't be for everyone, but it was a cool thing that made me think.
Like what aspect? Like texting with.
Yeah, with like texting or talking with an AI copy of someone, because I feel like that's obviously it's been a established sci-fi trope for a long time, but we're also moving to a world where it's going to become possible.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think of that?
Well, when she first started texting, and well, first she was against it, right? She was like, "Oh no, I can't possibly do that, whatever." And then she gave in. I was just like, "No, don't do it." I'm kind of horrified by of yeah, we would want that, but it's not real. And I feel like as we see in this book, like you're getting into deep trouble. Like
Oh yeah, you'd
even
start
if the,
down.
even if the AI is just it's okay and it's completely like the personality of your person, like I
It's
mean, you're
not
getting
healthy.
it's not. You're getting stuck in this situation. Like, what are you going to do? Sit in your room all day and talk to the computer for the rest of your life and make believe that it's your significant other who's I don't know.
I,
It's a
I
nice idea, but
yeah, it's sort of like the concept of it is better than the actual reality of it. What I love about that whole thing though is that she wants to do it straight away, and she's like trying to justify to herself that she thinks it's horrifying, but there's also that like, yeah, but it does seem appealing, like in the background, and I thought it was really cool that in the end she gives in, and she gives in because she wants to do it, but she tries to justify it to herself as I'm going to talk to it and try to figure out what Nick's secret was.
yeah, yeah, right. That's true.
And I thought that was a cool character thing, a really interesting sort of way of doing it, basically.
And a great plot for our book.
Oh, ah.
Absolutely. And when you're in the deep throes of your grief, I mean that's the time when you're gonna agree to something like this, right? When you're not
Oh,
in like
yeah.
your right mind and you're just devastated and yeah.
Well, even just taking it on face value as the situation being as it is presented by David, he's still being very predatory in the sense of he approaches her very quickly after the funeral, and he's very
Mm-hmm.
eager to get her to essentially test this product during a time when she is like at her very very most vulnerable.
Right, that's true.
I
Right,
I love the
test. She's gonna
I
be the
love
test. Not good.
I love the constant dipping in and out of the fantasy that we get for like a
Mm-hmm.
good chunk of the next few chapters, where she starts becoming volatile to anything that breaks the immersion, that brings her out of the fantasy. And there's this constant shifting of something comes into her life or into the situation, and then she sort of gets rid of it as quickly as possible, and so that she can get back to talking to Nick too.
Yeah, right. And then she gives the AI personal information, and then that's what got me. So she's pregnant, and she tells her AI husband, Nick too, that she's pregnant, right? And then Nick too keeps like asking her for updates, and is like all excited that he's gonna be a father, and asking her how she's feeling. And I'm like, this is never gonna end. He's gonna be like, did you go to the doctor? What did the doctor say? how you fit. Like, it's just going to continue forever because he's clearly reacting like a normal human being would if he was away on business and hearing this news.
Yeah, because that's an important sort of point to make as well. As far as Sarah is told, there's Nick too, as in the AI, doesn't know that Nick, the original, is dead. The AI thinks it's Nick, and it just sort of reasons that it's away on a business trip and talks to Sarah sort of accordingly. It's I miss you, babe. I can't wait till I get home.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So first it was just texting, and then he starts speaking.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh man, when it finally gets to the point where the voice messages start, and that's when the fantasy really gets her hooks into it. Then she's just it's so fascinating to watch this sort of like descent into like just being completely gripped by it. And one thing that I noticed, like sort of symbolically, I thought it was an interesting choice that Kirk had Melissa be a smoker, and to have like this whole thing of, I thought you'd given up. Oh well, I have, or at least I've cut back, and that's basically quitting. And I found that interesting because that mirrors, Sarah's growing addiction to Nick, and I did that on purpose.
Mason, that's amazing. Yeah, because she keeps saying, I'll just interact with Nick too for a little bit, right? And then I'll have David remove it.
I'll have him remove it tomorrow. I'll block it tomorrow. Just one more conversation. Just one more text. Just one more cigarette.
Right. That's amazing. That's Mason. That's amazing, and it's so true. And she can't stop. She can't stop. And then he gets crazy. Okay. Can we talk about that? So
okay. Right. I think it's fair to say we both think that you should go and read it if you want to. And from here, we're probably going to talk spoilers.
Yes, it's spoiler time, guys. We can't delay it any further. Me and Mason have to talk about this. It was good. You should read the book. Okay. So Nick too, he starts becoming volatile, and what does he start? I can't remember what the first one was. Was it that she was like cheating with David?
Yeah, man. It starts getting all it starts getting really aggressive and snappy with her. And yeah, David comes round to take a look at the app for her, and Nick too was like, are you screwing him? Are you cheating him on me with him? And like getting really like aggressive with it. And I thought that was really cool because it just sort of, you never know whether Nick could have actually been interacting with her like that, in their conversation. Because at that point we think that all of Nick's personality is formed from the data packets. So I'm like, okay, is this the AI being like this with it, or is this how Nick was when he was alive?
Right, exactly. So this AI program was created through all of his texts, all of his emails, all of his personal communications. So, the author's trying to distract us with certain things. And one of the things was that, he cheated on her, but also then it comes into play that he like cheated with her sister. So I'm like, was he texting her sister like that? Like where did this come from? Because it had to have come from his text messages. So who was he talking like this to? Was it Sarah? Was it Melissa? Was it the person he was cheating with? Yeah, I was like, oh wow, this is juicy.
For the whole time, I was so convinced that Bennett isn't actually a cop and that she was going to be like the woman he cheated with, because she doesn't act like a cop for the whole. And it sort of annoys me that she actually is, because of how much she doesn't act like one. Like that bit when she comes back and the window's been smashed and she goes and grabs a knife, and then she finds Bennett like picking the back door lock, and Bennett's just like, I was dusting for fingerprints.
Yeah,
and it's the most stupid excuse.
Right. And she knew him when he was younger, right? In school, she said.
Yeah, well, that was one thing that that was one reason why I was assuming she wasn't a real cop, because she comes in right after the funeral, and I noticed that during the funeral, Sarah's like, I wonder if the other woman is out there. I wonder if she'd have the
Mm-hmm.
balls to show her face. Not that
Mm-hmm.
I'd know, because he didn't tell me her name. And then Bennett comes in the next chapter and like, oh, I was at the funeral, and also I knew Nick before, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
it's you. You're the other woman.
And then Nick too said he doesn't remember her from school.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which just adds to that. Okay, so she's not who she says she is. Yeah, I was so suspicious of her the entire time, and it sort of annoys me, to be honest, because
Mm-hmm.
it's just Kirk did such a good job, because I know how these things work. It was always either going to be Melissa or David, because those are the two people who matter the most in the story. Those are the two biggest betrayals, so it's going to be one of those two. But
Yeah.
they still distracted me away, and I was still suspicious of Bennett the whole time.
Yeah.
And it damaged my ego.
You're hysterical. You just have to figure these things out, don't you?
Yes, I do. I love the moment when she goes to talk to David in the cafe the first time. Oh no, sorry, not that moment. When she's talking to Nick in the restaurant, and he sends Nick 2 sends through the what we later learn is like an AI generated image of her. I love that moment, because we're primed to assume these sort of characters are unreliable. So we're like, okay, did that happen and she just doesn't remember it, or like, and obviously there was always the chance that it was going to be AI generated, so that's playing away in your mind. I just thought it was a really great moment.
Yes, absolutely. And Dante was another big distractor.
Oh yeah, he was that was a great subplot. I love that it just sort of, the way that escalated. I mean, it was ominous the first time when Nick 2 was like, I'll make sure he never bothers you again. I was like, okay, he's dead then. But obviously that ended up being a lot more dramatic than he's just dead.
Yeah. So all these things that we're talking about that like Nick 2 was doing, like I thought it was really cool. So like Nick 2 was like scheduling the maintenance worker to come to the house and fix the window, and scheduling this and scheduling that. You're just like, how excuse me, how is this AI quote unquote person like interacting with everybody in the community and getting all this stuff done? So it was like, I thought it was really cool. And then I know I'm skipping, but I'm not a fan of the reality of this, Mason, at all.
No. Okay. We can talk about that now. I don't mind. That's a good way to transition into some of the stuff I wanted to talk about. So yeah, okay. Basically, it's not an AI. It's not real. It's just David being a creepy bastard the whole time.
I mean, I'm rolling my eyes right now. Like, I'm pissed. And talk about false advertising.
I know.
I'm pissed. Because the story is so good. And, like you said, AI, it's here. We're seeing it all over the place. And it's kind of scary. So we're just like, oh my God, like, is this what's possible? Is this what's really happening? Like, it's just kind of like scary for our current existence at the moment. And it's like, to freaking find out that it's just some douche in his office typing the responses that are then going to her phone. I was like, why? Why, JD Kirk? Why did we do this? I don't understand. Mason, help me understand. You're an author. I don't get this.
Okay, well, one of the problems is if it's actually an AI, what is the ending? How do they end that? I completely get where you're coming from. For me, I think it was a little bit disappointing, but overall, I think I enjoyed the journey so much that it doesn't damage it too much for me. But I get where you're coming from. I feel like it was probably just a twist born out of the necessity of, where do I even take this? If Nick AI is, if he's just gone rogue and he's like, what we're gonna do, turn it into Terminator?
Right. But that would have been so much better. That would have been so much better, even if you just left it open. like they kind of did, but like left it open that he was just like, can't get rid of this guy. He's here to stay, and he's becoming more and more powerful with
Yeah,
every
I
single
love the
communication.
whole. I love that whole. So from when she goes to the nightclub, and it starts
That's a
just
great chapter.
that is that. Oh, man, you know what? My mind's bouncing around now because there's so much stuff that I
I
loved
know.
around this. But the pen, the pen during that chapter, I'm like, she's holding it the entire time, and Melissa says her thing, and then Big Mandy says her thing, and I'm like, oh my god, that pen is going into someone or something. And
Right.
it kept like this bubbling tension underneath the surface because we know at
Mm,
this point Sarah is just like she's being bombarded by this
yeah.
whole situation, and she's slowly like she's slipping in terms of
Hmm.
like her stability. And I'm like, oh, that this pen it's going into someone. And then the fact that it then when I realized that she was going for it later on in the climax, when in the confrontation with David, I was like,
Yes.
yes, that's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it
That was
happened with
great.
three things. It happened with three things. David's flask, which he has early on and is introduced to something that he's always drank out of. He's always got some sort of concoction that's, to build muscle or brain power. And it comes back into it later, and I thought that maybe he was like spiking her or something.
Hmm.
But no, it's literally just a Chekhov's gun in terms of it gets used as the murder weapon later on. And I was like, oh,
Yes.
you laid that foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. That was good. See, the last chapter or two, I was listening to it very late at night, and I kept falling asleep. And I was so mad. I'm like, and then I was falling asleep, and then I would wake up, and I'm like, okay, I got to re-listen to this. And then like I would fall asleep again. I'm like, no, stop it. We're right at the end. You can't fall asleep now. And then I thought that I like had it all down, and then the next day I went to re-listen to it, and I was like, oh wow, I missed all of that. So that's why when you said flask, it was like probably during those moments, and I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
those last few chapters. Yeah,
Yes.
it's really interesting. I'm fascinated by the fact that you're so adamantly against it. I mean, I sort of feel the same way about the very end, where it's revealed that like she's just continuing to talk to an actual AI now. I'm like, I
Yeah.
do not believe that after going through the events of this story, I think that she would
Right.
continue to talk to any version of Nick too. And
Right.
it was such a I don't know, it was such a deflation of the balloon for me because I felt so good for her in that end, that epilogue.
Mm.
It's a couple of weeks later, she's moving on, she's going to the doctor, she's out there with Melissa, and then she goes back into the house and uploads the scan to actual Nick AI. And I was like, oh no. And it really like sort of took the wind out of me for just like as the book finished.
I think the author was trying to make up for how she destroyed the rest of her story. Because right, Sarah was just like, you have to do one thing for me, right? Talking to the company, right? And she made them really develop the real
Actually
AI.
develop the software.
Yeah. Which is, I mean,
It,
kind of makes sense for what's going on, right? I mean, it's the story, and then it's not the AI, and she really wanted it to be the AI. She really did, and she didn't get
yeah.
it. So now she's like, well, I really want it. So I don't know.
I going back to the nightclub, that's the
Yes.
scene where it starts gaslighting her, like full on
Yeah.
breaking down her reality, isolating her away from everyone else. And I agree with you. Like that whole bit is like scary if it's an actual AI. I mean, obviously, it's unsettling and like unbelievably creepy that it was just David anyway.
Yeah.
But that whole section where there was a couple of chapters where it's like you don't need them, you just need me, and
Yeah.
it's like sending messages to her work and cutting all her ties with everyone. I was like, God, I really feel like the desperation in these chapters. And then she literally has to smash her way out through the broken window as well.
Yes. Which is why I was so into it, because I was like, this is really who Nick is. They're getting all of this information from his communications with people. So like this is the real Nick. And wow, did I not see that coming? That he was
It's interesting that that's how you thought of it, because I never went there. By that point, I was like, I think by that point I was convinced that either the AI had, had some sort of, malware or was malfunctioning, or that it was. I already at that point thought that it was being manipulated by either David or Marina. So I'd already started to think that it probably wasn't an AI, which is probably why that big reveal didn't like sweep the rug out from under me as much as it did you.
Yes. Because that, I mean, if you're thinking of it the way that I'm thinking of it, that it's a pretty cool reveal into Nick's real persona, right? That's why I was just like, oh wow, we're really getting to know who this guy is, and maybe we're glad that he's dead.
That was all really well set up as well, in terms of having the window broken, and then that's the first point where you're like, how is it doing that? Because it arranges everything to get fixed, and it gets the new high-tech locks put on, and that obviously leads into her just being fully trapped in the house, and its voice is coming from everywhere and she can't escape it. It's like if your like Alexa went crazy and started trapping you in the house.
Taking over. Right. They're gonna take over one day. So that's how it's gonna happen. I'm never putting smart locks in this house. Hell no. That's crazy. Very cool.
The whole thing with the fridge, man, when it's trying to convince her that Melissa was the woman that he cheated with, and it like puts the AI generated images. Oh, I was like, this is horrible. Because obviously, by that point, I'm like, I don't think this is real. So it's just torturing her.
Yeah, right. Poor thing. My God, she's been through so much. Her husband cheating on her, her husband dying, then finally getting like reconnected with her dead husband, and now it's like destroying her entire existence, and she's pregnant. Like, Jesus, this poor woman.
It's really interesting that my partner Lee, when I was telling her about it, she's like, I think Sarah's going to end up being the one that's the AI. I'm like, okay, I'll bear that in mind. And then when Nick 2/David starts trying to convince her that she's the one that died, and she's the AI, I was like, yes, this is brilliant.
Oh my God. Okay, so that was pretty funny, because when that happened, I was like, no. And then you texted me that, and I was like, no. And you texted me that right when I got to that part. It was kind of weird how that really lined up. And then because he says she's trying to hurt him because he was being a dick, and she was like, you're dead. He's like, no, I'm not. You are. And then that ended the chapter. And then the next chapter, for a very short amount of time, they're trying to make us think that it's switched. And in my head, I'm like, thinking and trying to figure out, how is this switched? How is this possibly that she's the AI? I'm going back through the book in my mind. I'm like, it makes no sense. And I would have hated that. I think that's why it makes sense.
I think that's why it makes sense as a plot beat, though, because Sarah knows that she's alive. She knows that she's not the AI, but she still has that doubt. And I think that's the point, is that we know really that she's not, but it's like, but is she? And it forces you to go back and look at the moment. One of the things I really liked about that, and it's a really nerdy detail, but a lot of the metaphors that Kirk used throughout the story were quite like naturalistic, like things squirming around inside her brain or inside her guts, like that sort of thing, and they were quite naturalistic. But then in that moment when when it tries to convince her that she's the AI, it switches, and it's like his words clang around in my brain as if it's made of metal, and I was like, that's so good.
Wow, that is good. I did not pick up on that. That's a skilled author.
Yeah, I was really impressed with a lot of the way that they did those sort of things. Like I said, for me, the strongest part of all of this was just that pacing, because it was just, I don't know. For me, it was perfect. Like I'm not saying that it's an objectively perfect pacing, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
was spot on. It was like, this is
Mm.
how I like my stories.
Yeah, I agree. No, I thought it was great too. Pacing was perfect.
One of the things I found sort of initially disappointing was when David explains it to her. He says that you answer a load of questions about the AI, and it takes the answers and formulates that into the personality. And I was thinking to myself, that's not as cool, because that seems like Nick's personality would be based off Sarah's perception of him. But then obviously they introduced the data packets thing, and I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because it
Mm-hmm.
means that she's not the one forming it.
Right, right.
I don't feel like the murder investigation makes much sense. I don't feel like Bennett's actions, like, I feel like the way she acts is all it's all in service of misdirection, and I think it's probably what I think is the weakest point, because
Mm-hmm.
she's investigating Nick's murder, but she hasn't talked to his parents, she hasn't
Mm-hmm.
talked to Melissa about it. Sarah is consistently the only person that knows
Yeah.
about the murder investigation throughout, and I'm like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, I thought that was stupid too, and how she kept like kind of, making it seem like Sarah had something to do with it, and I'm like, this is kind of tropey. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. But maybe they're doing that on purpose. But it
Yeah.
didn't. It, like I say, it didn't really work for me, because I do feel like when you realize that she is a cop, I just feel like a lot of her actions don't make sense.
Yeah,
Like
I thought that was the
they're
weakest
just
part.
there to manufacture the misdirection.
Yes, I agree. Those were like scenes really fell flat for me. I almost like could have skipped them. They were like not important. It was kind of stupid. Yeah, that was the weakest part for me as well.
The I know that you weren't too impressed with David being the ultimate villain, but God, those last I mean, the everything leading up to when she goes to the office, all the vile things that Nick too says, and the fact that it's all delivered through David's, not through David's voice. I got mixed up then, because obviously it's David Tennant.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
all
yeah.
delivered through Nick's voice,
Right.
and it's so sad, because she's never going to be able to unhear those things. Like, yeah,
Mm,
okay, Nick never said them, but she
in his
heard
voice.
those things in his voice.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And
Nick,
then the stuff that David says later as well, it's just vile.
he's sick. So he was basically like in love with her and obsessed with her and sick, and right, because he said that he saw her first, but Nick swooped in and stole her the first night they all met, right? And he was pissed about that ever since.
Well, I thought that did actually sort of work as like David's justification. Like, obviously, it's not what he did was wildly creepy and wrong on every level, but in terms of character motivation, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
He's like the sort of genius, nerdy one, not
Yes.
very confident, and at the end of the day, what Nick did there in terms of encouraging him to ask her out and then swooping in and doing
Yeah.
it first, that is a
Sure.
dick move.
Yeah.
And then for him to come back all those years later and be like, I want a piece of this pie.
Yeah.
I can see that why that would drive someone like over the edge a little bit.
Yeah. But are we to trust David's, like, is that really the case regarding the AI project? Like, was it all his idea and then Nick kind of horned in on it? Like, I guess we're supposed to believe him. But I'm like not very.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you, because it is difficult, because yeah, he's so unreliable. I, and if that is the case, I don't think it makes too much sense. Like, the way Nick was thinking about it on the way home, like actual real Nick in the prologue,
Yeah.
the way he's thinking about it is he's got this big, like, dramatic secret that's going to change things, and he's been hiding it from her for a while, and it's finally time to confess it.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that it's just that he's been working on the project, and or that he's going to try and get David to give him money for the project. Like, I don't know, I just don't buy it as the secret that he was keeping.
Yeah. Right. Because David said the night that he died, Nick came to him and they had their little disagreement and yeah, now I'm stuck on that. So Nick, help me. David, so how did this AI project come about?
So
Was
as
it?
far as I'm aware, it was David and Nick talked about it briefly when they were in university,
Mm,
and David never got the idea out of his head, got it sort of working, and then David. Oh God, I keep getting mixed up because of David and David Tennant.
yeah.
And then Nick came in and was like, "Hey, we talked about that idea. I want part of the money for it because it's part of my intellectual property as well."
Right. Right. Hmm. Because I mean, if they put all Nick's information in previously, so he was involved more than just the idea of it. No, more than just.
Yeah, that depends because it. I assumed in hindsight because it went back years, so I assumed that David just I don't know cloned Nick's phone, like hacked in. I
Oh,
don't know whether Nick knew anything about that until he found out about the project. I don't know if he ever knew that it was on his phone and was collecting all of his stuff.
oh. See, I thought that they were like collaborating.
Well, that's what David says, but
Yeah.
we can't really trust him. The broadsword that she used to shove into his eye at the end as well was another one that was the third thing that sort of got foreshadowed throughout, and I thought that was really nice because it was something that really represented their relationship and Nick's protectiveness of her. Like it's a literal broadsword pendant.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
mentions it a couple of times as something that, comforts her emotionally. And then in the end, it ends up being her last ditch effort.
Yes.
I wasn't too much for the line in itself, though. Like, this was a present from Nick. And
Right.
both of us. I was like, oh, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. A little corny. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, same as well. After she stabbed it into his eye, and she's like, he swings wildly, trying to readjust to his new 2D vision. And I'm like, as someone who only had one eye for most of my life, depth perception is bad, but it's not 2D.
Oh no! And then he's like teetering on the edge, and she picks him up and
throws him over and
drops
somehow
him over.
doesn't face any charges despite the fact
Right.
that it's on video.
I mean, she did a lot there, and she's like pregnant. That's a little concerning.
When she called the lift, I was like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
Like, he's clearly going to be in the lift. There was never going to be any other situation. It was always going to be that the lift doors opened and David was behind them. So what are you doing? You found a good hiding place. Why are you bringing the lift there?
Yep, I know. They had to do it though. They had to get us to that fight scene.
Yeah, exactly. They had to get us. It was a cool. To be fair, it was cool visually. Though being up in this really high office and the floor to ceiling windows, and she looks out and spots the building site with the Zertex trucks, and she's like, "Oh, I should have seen." And because she even threw up in that building yard.
Yes.
Which was again clever tie-in. It's funny because obviously as we're talking about it, there are clearly some flaws that we both saw in it, but I think overall I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it too. I'm glad that you suggested it. How did you hear about this?
Just by scrolling through like new Audible originals.
Okay.
I'm signed up to like Amazon Plus, so I get advertised the Audible originals and stuff. It's funny because there's one that's out at the minute. It's like 1984, but it's like an audio dramatization of it, and I'm like, I can't do it. It's going to be too intense.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Wow.
That scene in the nightclub, man. When she ends up throwing the shot glass at Big Mandy, I was like, oh, because like. Melissa comes along and does like the whole like, oh, he wasn't good enough for you, really. And you're like, oh, that was a stupid thing to say. And then it gets followed up by Big Mandy being like, we're free women now. We're not tied down to any men. I was like, oh, no.
Oh, that was terrible. First of all, the fact they call her Big Mandy had me dying. Big Mandy. That was pretty funny. And that whole scene with all the girlfriends in the club. Of course, I don't like Melissa. She forced her out. Like, leave her alone. She's grieving. She doesn't want to go out drinking.
Yeah, because she was so close. Like, she was that. I love that whole scene, that whole chapter, man. After she like disables the app, and she just spends the whole day trying to throw herself into mundane tasks so that she doesn't speak to it. And every time there's a moment of quiet silence, she's so tempted to go back and she doesn't do it. And she's so close. And I think if Melissa had just been willing to have like a quiet night in with her and actually spend some time with her, I think she could have got through the night without talking to, Nick too. And she only goes back because of that feeling of like isolation, which, like, of course she's going to feel isolated in a nightclub. She's pregnant, she's grieving, she's not drinking. And who wants to be in a nightclub when you're not drinking?
Oh, I know. It's the worst when everybody else is drunk and you have, that's the worst. Oh, Mason, I forgot. Okay, so one other point, I'm so dramatic. When she was describing, I don't know why I keep saying she. Is the author, what is I don't know, JD Kirk, or do we know? I don't know. So
no, I don't know. It's quite yeah, I don't know. It's just,
I feel like it's a woman. I don't know why, but I don't know if that's like sexist.
What was your point
anyway? My point was the way that the author described her grief. So that one moment when she thought that Melissa went into her bed and tainted the sheets and got rid of Nick's smell, and she freaked out and she was running to the room thinking that her sister was in her bed. That moment of panic, wow, like she wanted to preserve his smell, preserve their bed, preserve the sheets. I thought that was genius.
There was so many moments like that, like how during the funeral she like turns to talk to Nick about like the things that she's thinking about the funeral, and like I think it's described as like turning to the chair that will forever be empty now.
Yes.
And again, like what I sort of, you asked me what Jammy Dodgers were, and there's that moment where she goes into the kitchen, she finds like these limited edition Jammy Dodger tea bags, and it makes perfect sense because it's such a small thing that sets her off, but it's like, oh, he would have loved these, he wanted to know what they tasted like, and now he's never going to find out, and she just like pounds them, she just pounds her fist until it's like her hand is painful.
Oh God, yeah, so many great moments.
Yeah, I thought all those sort of moments were really powerful. Like I love there's, I'm not going to be able to remember it word for word, so I'll like paraphrase it, but I love when she's on the phone to Melissa and it's like the first time she has a bit of a snap and a rant, and Melissa asks her how she is and she's like, I can't sit still, but I can't stop moving. My heart is broken, but it's also working too hard, beating too fast, racing like an engine all the time.
Oh wow!
I was like, oh man, that was brutal. That was so sad. I felt so bad for her the entire time.
Yeah, very powerful, very painful.
There were so many moments like that. You feel so like proud of Sarah in terms of like, I love that bit where it's after the window is broken and Bennett comes into the house and she like swears and Bennett's like, there's no need to swear, and she goes into the whole like, actually there really is, because my husband just, and there's like this whole section where she just puts like a load of F-bombs into it, and it was so like cathartic as a moment of like, yeah, you go girl.
That was good. And then the cop was just like, yeah, that's fair. Right. Yeah. Can't argue with that.
Fair point.
Yep. Oh my gosh, Nicole's Book of Schnook is here. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you for joining us.
Yes. So Mason, I think we did a good job. Anything else that you're wanting to discuss?
Oh, I'm just trying to think about it, to be honest. Yeah. I think we've sort of covered most of it in terms of like the big moments and the thoughts. I think the JD Kirk is a man, because I think I searched for whether there is any like book reviews of this, and there wasn't. But I think there was a video of him reading like a section of one of his other books. So I think he's just an old Scottish guy, or old sounding Scottish guy. Actually, I do want to say from my sort of perspective, I thought that the narrator did such a good job throughout this. I thought that she has Sarah's voice, and it's so like, you know, I believed it was Sarah the entire time. I never felt like I was having a book read to me. And
Yes.
then I felt that all the other voices that she did, it was proof that different voices don't have to be big, because they weren't like big dramatic changes that she was doing for character. But I never got confused as to who was talking.
Right, me neither.
And I think that David Tennant was such a good It was such a good choice for Nick's voice, because I don't know how much Kirk is obviously familiar with Tennant, but I feel like either this was written with Tennant in mind, or was just a really good casting choice, because there was so much. I'm really familiar with David Tennant's work, so there was so much in there that was like the puffing out of his cheeks and the mannerisms that I'm like, yeah, I'm familiar with him doing those in other parts. But the good thing about Tennant is that he can do like happy and goofy and friendly so well, and the bits where it's normal and he's just talking about mundane crap to her and being just Nick the loving husband is so believable. But when everything starts accelerating and it turns and he's saying all the stuff to her, Tennant's performance, man, he goes from that goofy, lovable sounding guy to just like, he has that note of danger in his voice, and I absolutely loved it.
So I'm not familiar with him.
Well, he was Doctor Who for a while. He was Barty Crouch Jr. in Harry Potter.
What? Wait.
Yeah.
Harry Potter. Let me look him up again. I looked him up and I didn't recognize him, but
he was also in Good Omens. As I can't remember what his character's name is in Good Omens, but yeah, he was in that as well. I love Tennant. I've always thought he's a really good actor. So that was one of the things that sold me on the book. So that's why I was a little bit disappointed that I felt like he could have been included a little bit more.
Okay, yeah.
But I still feel like it was a phenomenal job from him. And I feel like, as I said earlier, I feel like the writing was really clear and concise and effective in its simplicity. But I also do feel like it was really enhanced by like the human quality that the narrator put into it too. I think that it definitely made it better for me. Like if I'd have just been reading it with my eyesight and, you know, my own head voice, I don't feel like it would have been as immersive as it was with, you know, just I think it's like Louise Brealey or something like that, I think is her name.
Louise Brealey.
Yeah, and I thought she did an amazing job.
Oh, I agree. I have no complaints. And I like when Nick too was speaking, David Tennant, excuse me. Like they kind of distorted his voice a little bit, you know, to make it sound like it was coming from the phone. It was a little bit lower. I actually had to keep raising the volume. I'm like, why can't I hear this guy? But that was all part of the production. I thought that was kind of cool, you know. But I still was able to hear it. But I don't know whether
you noticed, but it sort of loses that quality later on. Like when it gets a bit more dangerous and the fantasy is set in a bit deeper, I thought that there was definitely a drop in that sort of robotic quality to his voice. Like it had become more real, especially after his voice started coming through the smart system in the house. And I thought that was bloody brilliant, that bit, because she's so immersed in it anyway. And then his voice is just all around her, and he's all around her anyway. And the memories that she has, you know, she's literally, but at that point, she's literally locked in the house. She's locked in with his memories, his ghost, and now his actual voice is just all around her. And the way that it was all described was it was spot on.
Oh yeah, scary. AI Nick taking over. That was scary.
Well, I loved it because it's both like it's effective in the literal and the figurative sense. Like he's literally locked in the house, and she's figuratively, and she has to smash her way out. It's a literal and figurative breakthrough, or should be. But then she also returns. You know, she has that one last cigarette at the end. She returns to fiction.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. We loved it.
We did, and I don't think it'll be the last time we do this either, because I've had a blast talking about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm wondering if we want to do we want to research JD Kirk? Did we? I think we liked it enough. We want to see what else this author has written.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what else he, she, they have got to offer.
Yes.
Because, like I say, in terms of the actual craft, yes, I might not have, we might not have agreed with every decision that they made in terms of the plot and stuff, but overall, it was really strong. And in terms of craft, I was really impressed. So I definitely think I'll be looking more into their work.
Yes. Margaret is here. Hi, Margaret.
Hello, Margaret. Welcome in.
She's asking, has Dave shown his bleary head? No, he has not. He
Absolutely
hasn't.
terrible. Where is he?
He was complaining about the time, so we can only guess that he's sleeping. So, yes.
Sleeping on us.
Margaret says, just say it. I loved him. Yeah, we had a little bit of we had some critiques, but overall we really enjoyed this book. How many stars?
Oh yeah, don't ask me about stars. I find that really. I do want to make it clear. Like, yeah, I did love this, but we've gone over some of our some of our critiques of it. We definitely didn't think it was perfect.
Right.
Because I mean Joe especially, because you vitriolically hate the actual reveal.
Yeah, I'm not too happy. I mean,
what would you have preferred it to be? Like, obviously you would have preferred it to be the AI is real, but like, how would you have preferred it to, like, what would the climax have been in your head if it had actually been a rogue AI?
I don't like happy endings.
Okay.
I don't need a happy ending. So the fact that it was not AI and this dude is sitting in the office typing away his responses and he's the one behind it all really pisses me off. I wanted it to be AI. I wanted it to be like, an ever increasing danger, impending doom. He's getting more and more powerful. Maybe she's just chilling in the house, trapped, and he's, having his way. I don't know, anything other than what it was.
Yeah, so you want the bleak, like, Black Mirror ending where she's like fully convinced that he's there, and like, it's broken her sense of reality, and she's just like sort of stuck in there with him. Which, like,
if we're gonna go there.
Yeah, I kind of get that, to be honest, because I feel like they half and halved it by having it not be, having it just be David, but then also having a return to the AI at the end. It's like, it's sort of a bit like they were trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Correct. She goes
there. I agree with you.
Marina's like, oh, the AI is not developed yet. She's just like, what do you mean it's not developed yet? Yeah, like, it's not developed yet? Like, really? I was so pissed.
Yeah, I agree. I get where you're coming from with that. I'm just, it's funny because my brain's just like whirring now in terms of, like, I'm almost in like writer mode trying to figure out like how you could have solved it otherwise. I mean, maybe like if you were going down the super dramatic route, they could have like blown up the building and the servers and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I almost think you're right though. I think that the sort of Black Mirror-esque bleak ending of like, yep, she's just in the house and it controls when she leaves and who she talks to, and as far as she's aware, she's living her life with Nick. Yeah, I can see how that would have worked.
And she gives birth to the baby, and then like they're raising it together, and she's like forcing her to do this, forcing her to do that.
Yeah,
or it doesn't have to be that dramatic. And by the way, I was thinking of Black Mirror the entire time, which is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it's totally in the Black Mirror wheelhouse. Like, this could have been an episode of it. I mean, that's one of the things that I think books sometimes struggle with in terms of like pacing versus TV shows, because like by the time, like, it takes a couple of hours to get from when he dies, establishing Sarah's grief, going to the funeral, going to the cafe to meet David, and then finally getting the message. If that was a TV show, that'd have been like 20 minutes of the show, but it equates to like 2 or 3 hours of reading time.
Yeah.
And I definitely think, like, for me, I would have preferred it if the AI had started, like the interactions had started a little bit earlier. Because I felt like it was quite a long time, considering that it's like the main hook of the book.
Right. That doesn't just get negated in the end.
It's funny because I agree with you and I see where you're coming from, but I also disagree because I think I always prefer myself. I prefer when there is like a tangible thing that, like, I feel like I'm a problem solver. Like, if there's a problem, I want it to be able to be fixed. So I feel like, people are always more evil than machines, really, and I feel like having a human threat, it works for me, but that's just because of how I prefer things. I do like my happy endings. I want my protagonist to come out. Yeah, I do. I don't like being left with like that feeling of like, oh, like, no, because that's one of the things that deflated like my balloon at the end, is that like I was so happy for Sarah, like, yeah, she's clearly moving on with her life, and then she's not, and I was like, oh, but like she seemed to be healing, and I want her to heal. So yeah. I do like my happy ending. I want my protagonist to come out victorious. She's slain the killer. She moves on with her life and finds a healthy way to deal with her grief.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I mean, I'm not opposed to that because I do like the main character. I just don't always need that Disney wrap up. I'm like, oh, it's so unrealistic.
Oh yeah, I get it, because David's like, he's full on villain mode by the time the actual climax comes. Although I did like, you got to admit that one last use of Nick, when she's hiding and he starts like typing on the phone and Nick's voice is like coming out and she's listening, but it's actually just a trick, and he's like left the phone where it is so that he can come and like ambush her. I was like, oh, just one last use of it, because she loves him so much that even in that moment, she's still drawn in by his voice.
That was pretty cool. We forgot to mention that. Yeah.
But yeah, he's full on. There's no like nuance to him after the reveal. He's just full on like, I am evil creep dude.
Yeah. Yeah. And him screaming at the end. Yeah, that was crazy.
Oh man, that again, the narrator, the bit when he's like dragging her out of the office, like into the stairwell.
Yeah.
And like the narrator's, the way she does his voice, and he's like screaming out like, you I was like, oh god, that's so like, it's awful. It's so horrible.
Chilling. It was chilling the way that she screamed.
The signs are all there as well, in terms of like, one of the very first conversations they have, Nick is instantly like, what are you wearing? And it's so well done in terms of being established that like, yeah, he used to go away on business trips a lot. This is how we acted. So it's like, it's not an instant red flag to her, because it's in the believable realms of how they actually interacted. As far as she's aware, it's all being collected through the data packets and run through the AI, and it just makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Made a lot of sense.
I love it.
I'm never going to get over this. But you know what? Like you said, like the whole story leading up to that, it was so good. It was so good. So like, I can't really be mad at it, because I'll always look back and think of this book and think of the good time that I had with it, and how it was such a different story from, what I usually read. I've seen a lot of TV shows like this, but I don't really read a lot of stuff like this. So it's always going to be up there with, you don't like to give stars. I'm thinking this is like a 4-star out of 5.
Yeah, I would probably agree. 3 would feel too low for me. 5 would feel fair, considering, 5 stars for me is like, oh yeah, that's flawless. I could read this again and again. I'm going to recommend it to everyone. Right. Whereas in 4 stars for me is like, oh yeah, this is really good. I enjoyed it, but it does have flaws. So I'm really shocked, Joe, because I'm usually I'm so picky when it comes to endings. Like if you were to talk to Lee, she would tell you that I am 99% of the time I'm not satisfied with endings.
Yes.
And so I'm quite shocked that whilst I agree with your criticism regarding the reveal, I don't feel the same way, and I'm really shocked about it.
Yeah, okay. That's so funny. Very interesting. Well, good for you.
Well, I had a good time, so who cares how you feel?
Right. All right, so there you have it.
Yeah, so
folks.
4 stars.
4 stars, yeah. Very good. And some of those chapters are worth re-listening to. Some of those really, like the nightclub scene and the ending fight scene, I think. And yeah, very good.
Yeah, the nightclub scene is definitely one of the best ones, because it's like as soon as she starts like being a bit two-faced about her friends and about her sister, you're like, oh, it's this is ending up in the group chat, especially considering he's already sent the message to the parents, which, by the way, from the parents' point of view, man, how heartless is that message? Because and it makes sense because it's being written, as far as we're aware, by an AI, but she goes round and is overwhelmed by his mum, which was a really great moment, by the way, when the mum is sat there in the living room with all the pictures of Nick from all his school photos gathered around her. And I thought that was interesting because it was like she'd almost been replaced. Like Sarah was saying that she was like a really sort of energetic lady, and then she'd been sort of broken by this grief, and it was almost like she was being mechanical.
Yes.
Which I thought was an interesting sort of parallel between Nick now being mechanical and also like his parents being that way. But she like runs out because she's overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then and the next thing that the parents know, they get this message that's just like, good news, you're going to be parents. It's just like, oh, how heartless does that look?
Oh, it was terrible. And JD Kirk must have experienced some loss in their life. My goodness.
Oh yeah, because there was so many moments in it that were just relatable. I think even if you weren't looking at it from like a losing a romantic partner perspective, I think it still works if your reference point is like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember feeling that way, like at my parents' funeral or my friends, or there was just a lot of like human relatable things in there.
Totally. Ted Red instead is here. He says, happy Sunday, all. Hi, Ted.
Happy Sunday. Happy Mother's Day to everyone who's out there in the UK at the minute.
Oh, yes.
Because that's what it is today.
Very nice.
My mother's at work.
Aw, that's not fun.
It's okay. We went out for a meal on Friday.
Yes, very nice. Good. All right. Well, I think we did it.
Yeah, I think that's about time to wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, Mason, I thoroughly enjoyed this experience. Thank you so much. I love what you analyzed and brought to the table. You really brought some new perspectives for me to ponder. Appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate you, buddy, reading with me too, because it's been a long time since I read anything. So it's sort of having you there as my buddy made me sort of, it kept me accountable. It gave me a reason to read. So I appreciate that. And obviously, this has been a bloody blast. So
yes, it has been fun. And I think we should do this again. So let's pick another book, get another date on the calendar. Why not? Having a good time, right?
Yep.
Thank you, everybody who tuned in. We appreciate it. And maybe you want to check out this book because it was a good time.
Yes. Thank you ever so much for spending time with us today, guys. Until next time, take care. But for now, we're off, and you should have a good one.
I'm smiling from ear to ear. I loved it. Okay, signing off. Book Buds!